Kevin, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
It's nice to have you. So that's odd that when you hear a comedian sign the Nickelback's label. What's that all about?
I was doing. I opened for the great Bill Burr back in January in Vancouver, and one of the producers from 604 Records, guy Kevy, he's in the band Fake Shark. He was in the crowd, and I guess 604 had been talking about moving into the comedy world for a while, and Kevy called him up after the show and said, "I think we've got a guy here that would work with the label." So, yeah, they called me in for a meeting, and I went in and sat under a plaque that said, "Congratulations, Nickelback, for 50 million albums sold worldwide." So,
were you able to hold it in? Did you want to, give it out a little bit?
I wanted to sell. If I could sell 1/10 of that, I would be over the moon. So, yeah,
I feel like the Nickelback hate is not entirely deserved.
No, it's played out too at this point.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a bunch of press for the album release, and there's a lot of that where it's like people trying to get me to slam on Nickelback. I was like, well, why would I do that?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, these guys, Chad's giving you a nice shot here. Why don't you smash on his band? And then one interview I did the other day, they said off the air, they go, yeah, Nickelback. Oh, you know what? I think all the Nickelback hate is crazy, and they've got some songs. And I was like, yeah, everybody I know can sing along with at least 3 songs, almost word for word. And then we get on the air, and they're like, yeah, so Tickle Crack, huh? And I was like, what? You heel? How dare you?
He is a heel.
Yeah.
He is. He's a jabroni.
Yeah.
Your new record's called Dreamboat. It debuts at #1 on the iTunes comedy chart.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It felt like a big deal. It was really exciting. I woke up in the morning and on the 21st, the day of the release, and I was behind a French-Canadian comedian, and I was so disappointed. And by 10 a.m. that day, though, it was in #1, and it was for a day and a half. And then I don't know how their algorithm works, but it quickly dropped out of the top 150. But of course, after this CBCQ appearance,
you're going to get to 149.
Oh, I hope.
At least, maybe 131.
I hope. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. What were you doing before you did stand-up?
I've done all sorts of things. I worked with kids. I was a noon hour supervisor at an elementary school. I was a janitor.
You were a janitor?
I did concrete restoration. Yeah, I was a janitor. I talk about it on my album. I was a janitor at the school district that I went to.
Yeah.
So I got to make daily eye contact with the teachers who told me it wouldn't amount to anything. It was nice. But yeah, all sorts of stuff.
On your record, you talk about, I don't mean to be telling your jokes.
No, that's fine.
We can cut it. But I like the moment where the teachers get you to break up something that's happening behind the benches.
Yeah. The teacher said she could smell a certain kind of smoke from a left-handed cigarette coming from behind the gym, and asked me if I would go shoo away whoever was there. And of course I said sure, because who's more respected at a high school than the janitor? So,
so what was the moment like? What was the moment? I talked to Dane Cook earlier today, which was cool, and he talked about that moment when he was 15, and he looked at his sister, and his sister had just came back from seeing Steve Martin do Madison Square Garden live, right? And he said, "I just want to do that. That's what I'm going to do." And the next thing he did, he went up to a club. He went to a club in Boston. What was that moment for you? You said, I've been thinking about it. I know you were a great fan of stand-up,
sure,
like a lot of people are, and they harbor these secret desires to get up on stage. What was that moment for you?
For me, I think it was I went to see a comedy tour. I don't want to say specifically because I'm about to talk bad about some of the people on it. But no, I went to see a comedy tour that came through Victoria, and I thought I could do that. Because prior to that, my real experience with stand-up was mostly George Carlin and Chris Rock, because I'd watch boxing on HBO with my dad on a Saturday night, and if the fight ended early because of a knockout or whatever, they'd put on a comedy special to fill the time. And so I remember thinking, like, I couldn't do that. Like George Carlin and Chris Rock, they had a lot of social commentary and just really a lot of gravitas. But I was like, well, that's not me. But then I saw this comedy tour come through Victoria, and I was like, well, I could do that. I didn't know that was part of it,
What's
too.
that? Like, it was more confessional?
It was more fun. Like, it was just silly kind of, there wasn't a lot of depth to it, and the interacting, the playing with the crowd. And I was like, well, I think I could do that. So 6 months later, I started for the very first time. And I started in Victoria, BC, where there was no real stand-up scene at the time. So I would go to music open mics and ask if I could go on, and they would put me up between a bunch of guys playing Sublime covers.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, it was
At least
great.
the crowd was ready to laugh.
No.
No.
Those were nightmares, but fun enough that I had to keep doing it. And then 2010, a comedy club in Victoria opened up, Hecklers, which it started as a sports bar with that name, and then they started doing comedy. It is the worst name for a comedy club, but it's one of the best clubs in the country.
But does it encourage the behavior that the club's named after?
No, they specifically for the first 4 or 5 years there, they had a introduction CD that would play, and it would say, listen, we know it's named Hecklers, just don't do it. You may think you're being cool, but you actually sound like an a-hole, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, no, it's a great club. The manager there is my favorite person in comedy who is not a comedian. He's just so good at cooling people off, like, because, sometimes in clubs, people start to get a little rowdy, and then as soon as you say, you got to keep it down. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having fun at a comedy show. Sorry for laughing too hard. Yeah, right. No one has ever been kicked out of a comedy club for laughing too hard. But he's great at cooling that kind of behavior off. So, yeah, it's just such a fun place to play.
But those early days, like, I think the thing that would make most stand-ups who, like, people who are on the sidelines, because I think you see Chris Rock, you see George Carlin, you see Louis C.K., you see these stand-up specials, and they're at the peak of their career. It's mainly manufactured. Right. They're in a theater. People paid money to be there, and they're gonna laugh. Chris Rock kind of says, when I show up places, people give me the first 10 minutes for free.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They like me, so they're gonna laugh. What I think turns a lot of stand-ups off is when they get up on stage for that first time and they don't get the laughs and they bomb. Yeah. And most people just drop it right there.
Absolutely.
And not to say that happened in the early days, though. I'm guessing it did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, like, how do you deal with that?
My first time on stage went well because I worked so hard on, like, that set for 6 months. And then my second time went a little bit less good, but was still good enough where I was like, oh man, I am going to be so good at this. So then my third time, I died 1,000 deaths in 10 minutes. And I got heckled, and a lady was heckling me, and I said, what do you want? And she goes, a better comedian. And I was like, well,
pretty quick,
too. Yeah, good for her.
Yeah.
But
Mom.
Yeah, I hope she fell down the stairs on her way out of the club. But it was. I had to keep doing it, and I feel that that's where a lot of people who show promise fall off the map because they can't handle the bombing.
That's the point that I'm interested in. Is you just kind of said I had to keep doing it. Most people don't feel that way. Like, what's the difference there?
I don't know. I can only speak to my experiences, and it's just that it's something I feel like I have to keep doing it because I love it, but also I'm needy.
What?
I guess I'm needy. Like, I need that. I need it. I don't know. It's not something that I ever intellectualize. Like, it's just something that I feel like I have to keep doing.
I mean, I understand. Like, it's performing gives you a feeling, gives you a rush that almost sometimes nothing else really gives you.
Absolutely.
And you're so vulnerable when you're on stage at a comedy club because you can't go into a song.
Right.
You can't start.
Sometimes when a joke goes bad, I sing about how bad it was, but that joke didn't work.
But the thing about musicians, though, is that, like, when you make your first record as a musician, you kind of spend your whole life making that first record.
Right.
And then it comes out, does okay, and then you think, oh God, I got not that much time to make the second one.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine going into this. This is a lot of the best of your material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming into this thing. Are you the kind of person who's just going to keep doing this for a really long time, or are you already thinking about the next thing you want to do?
The plan right now is just to start writing. Like, I've already started, but is just to build the new act. I got asked that question earlier today, like, so what's next? TV, movies? And I was like, oh God, I never thought that big.
No, but I mean, like, what's next in terms of, like, you take all of your experiences and put it into this first one.
Oh, okay, I see what you say. Yeah, I don't know, because the thing, it's very tough to develop material that is original, true to yourself, and not derivative of other people's acts, because that is the worst thing you can do in comedy is to be labeled a joke thief or so it's tough. And I don't do a lot of things. I do stand up and I do my day job, and then I go home and go out to a show, and then I go home. So it's hard that now I've got to push myself to start doing more things so that I've got more things to write about. Because for the longest time, it was just, work and shows and work and shows. And nobody wants to hear about, like, it's a lot of comedians get into a point where they're like, all they're doing is stand up, and you hear them start to tell jokes about being in the stand-up world, and that doesn't necessarily translate to a lot of people. So I've got to push myself to get out there and do stuff so that I have stuff to talk about.
You mentioned you had a day job. What's your day job?
I work in an office downtown Vancouver. I don't like to get too specific because...
Do they know what you do?
Oh, yeah, they know. They're pretty supportive of what I do, but... I don't. The only reason I don't like to get into specifics on that is that what if I accidentally say something that offends people without my intention being to offend people, and then people try and get everybody fired now. So that's the thing. So I just don't talk about specifically what I do for a living because of that. Like, I'm not an offensive person. Like a comedian intentionally. I'm not trying to shock. I hate that comics
that's a thing, right?
That absolutely is, and it's kind of a dead end street. There are very few shock comics that are out there still working, and those that are kind of already have their fan base built in. But yeah, it's never my intention to go out and shock people or upset people, but sometimes what I think is funny is a little bit darker, like stabbing a clerk in the throat. But yeah, so what was the question?
Well,
I'm on acid, sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. No, you haven't looked at me in the eye the entire time.
That's terrible. I can't make eye contact.
You've been looking at the other side.
Yeah.
No, you've been looking at the other side of the room the entire time and just staring at the lights.
Yeah.
You open up for Bill Burr.
Yeah.
You open up for Doug Stanhope and Norm Macdonald. But what's interesting is that you said that a lot of these are kind of last minute things. Like you get a phone call.
Yeah, like the Burr one was a few days out because they requested a couple of Vancouver comics send in a tape. And then they picked from a couple of us, and they chose me, which was great. The Norm one I got on 35 minutes notice.
What's that like, man?
It was crazy because Norm is my hero in comedy. He's my favorite comedian. He's the greatest talk show guest. He's just amazing. And I had just got home. I'd driven home from 100 Mile House, BC, which is 5 or 6 hours north of Vancouver. And I was laying in bed, eating a slice of pizza, watching Netflix, and I got a text that said, "Can you be at the Vogue at 8? We need a host for Norm." And I almost said no because I was so tired and just like, this won't go well. But it was also, I knew that the next morning that I would hate myself for not taking that opportunity. So I put on a nice pair of pants and drove down to the theater.
How did it go?
It was great, and it was awesome because Norm watched my set from the wings, and I could hear him laughing at one point, and it was so surreal. So I could hear him laughing, and I'm still talking, but my brain is only thinking about, like, my mouth is on autopilot. My brain is just thinking, he's laughing right now. Norm, you can hear Norm laughing right now. It was the greatest. And just to get to hang out with him was so fun because he likes to mess with people. That's kind of his thing too. And so I walked into the dressing room, and the first thing he says is, he stands up, and I was shocked by it. He's like 3 or 4 inches taller than me, and I'm a fairly tall guy. And he stands up and he goes, "You're the comedian, right? I asked for you specifically," which of course you didn't. So you didn't ask for me in the last 40 minutes specifically. So I didn't know how to respond. So I was just like, "Thank you." And but he was super nice. And then we were standing in the wings just waiting to go on, and he starts telling me a story. He goes, my last show, Steve Martin and Paul Simon showed up, and I didn't know they were there, and they were there for the last 20 minutes of the show, and I was doing crowd work. Because I got these geniuses here watching me, and I'm talking to a guy in the front row about his cold. I just thought that was the greatest.
Kevin, thanks so much for I want to say this special is really funny, man.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy with how it's been received so far, and I was really excited when we recorded it that weekend that I thought it went well. And then it was released on the 21st of October, and on the 20th, I was like, "What if I've made a terrible mistake?" So I'm really happy with how it's been received. So and thank you.
It's so cool to have you now. Come back like when it gets bigger.
Yeah, deal.
You got it. That's Kevin Banner. He is a stand-up comic. His debut album is called Dreamboat. It's out now on iTunes.